I'd like to thank Gideon for giving me this opportunity to share some Torah over Yagdil Torah, a really great platform. So I've chosen a very famous pasuk from this week's parasha. Daber el kol hadat b'nei Yisrael v'amarta alehem, Kedoshim tiyu, ki kadosh ani Hashem Elokeichem. Speak to the whole congregation of Israel and say to them, you shall be holy, for I, the Lord your God, am holy. This is the source of the well-known idea of emulating God's characteristics by aligning our behaviour with those by which God is described. The Ramban takes this to an even higher level by explaining the mitzvah in a very precise nature and the behaviour that is required of an Eved Hashem. So although the Torah forbids certain forbidden relations and consumption of certain foods such as non-kosher, it nevertheless permits or even encourages a man to be with his wife and a person to eat meat and wine. So the Ramban explains that a desirous person will read into this and find a place to overindulge in physical pleasures and act vulgarly, even without transgressing any explicit mitzvot in the Torah. This is why, after explicitly listing those actions which are forbidden, the Torah expresses this much more general, encompassing rule of Kedoshim tiyu, because Hashem is holy. We are to be holy because Hashem is. Wine, for example, is something which can cause so much damage, something which causes a person to have lowered inhibitions, could perhaps act violently, irresponsibly, act in a damaging way, yet it's also the beverage of choice for Kiddush. So how do we understand this? It's because Judaism doesn't frown on physicality, but rather it frowns on excessive, damaging physicality. Kiddush on wine comes to sanctify something completely mundane, to elevate it to a higher spiritual plane. The Ramban explains that although many of our mitzvot are Dorabanan, they're rabbinic, nevertheless they can be found in the essence of the Torah, just in the words of the Torah, we understand a moral code. So a person may think they're very righteous by keeping all Torah and mitzvot by the letter of the law, but perhaps the more important question to ask ourselves is, are we living a life of Torah and mitzvot, an all-encompassing life? Being a good person and behaving correctly are essential to being an Evet Hashem and Ben Torah. Rav Aaron Lichtenstein, in his book By His Light, uses the term glut kosher hedonism to effectively capture this idea. He says, in recent years, and I'll just quote, a whole culture has developed geared towards from Jews, where the message is enjoy, 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 and everything has a hechsher and a super hechsher. There's been a certain debasement of values in which people have a concern for the minutiae of halacha, but with a complete lack of awareness of the extent to which the underlying message is so totally non-halachic and anti-halachic. Enjoyment is definitely acceptable, in fact encouraged, but it's got to be done in the right way, within the framework of halacha. Rav Shechter, I remember, once eloquently put, Machshava is the halacha of thinking. And it's not just about our actions within halacha, it's also about the way we think. And that definitely impacts our behavior. We're not given mitzvot to live a dual life between our actions and our thoughts, but actually it's to be an all-encompassing life, a way of life. Someone who behaves in this glut kosher hedonistic way really has missed the point of mitzvot, because they're really here to elevate us and to bring us onto a higher spiritual plane. Living a life of Torah mitzvah is going above and beyond the letter of the law to emulate God's characteristics. The meaning of the word from is much more than box ticking, getting up in the morning, washing your hands, davening Acharei, keeping Shabbat. There's much more to it than that. Bereshit Rabbah 44:1 explains the mitzvot were only given to make humans better. The Maharal writes extensively in Tiferet Yisrael the idea of how the world was created incomplete with shortcomings, and so too was man. Mitzvot were given to us to elevate that, to refine ourselves and our surroundings, to make the world a better place, a more spiritual place. So with a deeper understanding of the meaning of mitzvot, we're now able to begin to appreciate their encompassing nature. There's a very well-known Gemara in Bava Kama 87a, which concludes that a person who does something after being commanded is superior to one who does it without being commanded. How does this make sense? Surely one who is doing something when they're not commanded to do it is acting out of true internal passion and enthusiasm to get closer to God, yet one who is commanded to do it is more praiseworthy. How do we understand this? The nature of mitzvah is not to benefit us, even if that is a byproduct. We need to perform mitzvah to fulfill God's will, and that's why God commanded us, because they're more important than what we like to do, so that we in turn can achieve closeness to Hashem. Therefore, when the Ramban commented that a person should go above and beyond the exact words of the Torah, above the letter of the law, he is teaching us that part of being a serious Jew is having the behavior to match it. The Gemara in Avodah Zarah quotes the opinion of Rav Huna. Anyone who occupies himself with Torah alone is considered one who does not have a God. Compares it to Avodah Zarah. How does this make sense? He's learning Torah the whole day. Clearly he's devoting his life to Hashem. Rav Huna is talking about someone who learns Torah but doesn't live by it. They might have their head in a book all day learning Gemara after Gemara, but they're not living by what they're learning. They're not living by what they preach. This is compared to someone without a God, because he is compartmentalizing Torah and Mitzvah and limits it to the area of learning without extending it to behavior. That is Avodah Zarah, because it's implying that Torah and these ethics which we learn from the Torah and from Hashem are limited to one area of life and they don't extend to our entire lives. Behaving like an Eved Hashem is just as big a component, if not bigger, than learning like one. And therefore cutting corners with mitzvot with the aim of keeping only to the letter of the law is incomplete. Through realizing the nature and purpose of mitzvot, may we realize the behavior that is required of all of us in all areas of our lives so we can reach a high spiritual level and live a fulfilling life. Shabbat Shalom.